we were reporting all morning, there has been a tentative agreement in the nurses' strike.
Yeah, joining us now this morning is Public Advocate Jumaane Williams to talk about that and the city's housing crisis. So good morning, Jumaane. Thanks again for being with us this morning.
Good morning. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me again.
Yeah, let's go right to it. Your thoughts first on the settlement that came down overnight with the nurses.
You know, all I kept saying is if you banged pots at 7 p.m., 7 a.m., and called people heroes, you shouldn't have them standing out in the winter and when you have abused the love of their patients for such a long time. All of the things that nurses have been complaining about for many, many years. I'm glad that they got a contract. And I want to shout out my sister, a nurse practitioner, actually at Morningside, Mount Sinai.
There you go. So let's talk about also another big story, and that's New York's housing crisis, right? It was the central focus of Governor Kathy Hochul's State of the State speech. I'm sure you were listening. I read your statement after it, right? So how realistic is her plan to build 800,000 new homes over the next decade, Public Advocate? Because this is something we talk about, but it never actually comes to fruition. Is it different this time?
Well, you know, I had a reason to be running around the state in the past few months, and we actually said we need 1 million units preserved and built. So I got to say many parts of the speech were more encouraging than I expected. That was one of them. The broad strokes sound really good. There's some details we have to work out. One of the big ones is that there is no housing plan is real unless at least 60% or more is preservation, because we'll never build more than we're losing. And so we really have to get in there and make sure that we're codifying things like good cause eviction. We have opportunities like TOPA and COPA, which basically means giving tenants the ability to purchase and own buildings, because we have to preserve what we have. The next flag is making sure that any incentives, any changes to the law to help people build easier, which we should do, should really focus on deep affordability.
Well, like you said, you kind of have to use what you have, which goes hand in hand with what Mayor Adams is proposing, right? To convert empty office spaces into apartments, which will obviously need the support of the state and city. So what are the pros and cons to that?
Well, one, we've been pushing and asking for big, bold ideas. And I think this is really in the right direction, even in the mayor's plan asking for 500,000 units. Again, we want to see most of those about preservation and any incentives be focused on deeply income-tolerant affordability. But we want to make sure that if we're going to make changes, like the ones we're talking about, to office buildings, which we should, again, affordability has to be the key. And we have to be deep income target affordability, because something is affordable to everyone. And the people who need the most housing have seen that housing either not built or preserved for a very long time. And where the city has focused its construction, and it has not really been in track with the people who need it the most.
Okay, so let's stick with the preservation idea for a second, right? Because you released the worst landlords list. You know, Public Advocates Office usually does this. You found that the number of violations are the highest they've ever been. In fact, one landlord had nearly 3,000 violations. Now, we just had the city comptroller, Brad Lander, on talking about your very list, right? And how he was surprised to see that some of these landlords didn't even get fined. So how do you preserve and maintain a building when you look at the worst landlord list and some of them are still moving on as landlords?
And let me just add on to that. We are actually now in the highest rental market in the country, more and possibly the world, actually, and it's record. So we have the highest rents and the highest amount of violations. We have to make it not profitable to do this. And so until, I believe, we start taking buildings from landlords and actually prosecuting people criminally when we see things like deadly fires, I'm not sure things are going to change. We do have a package of bills in the city council trying to put some more teeth into these laws so that we can make it not profitable to do this. We really have to stop the incentivizing of people not providing heat, not providing hot water, not making repairs. We haven't done a good job of it.
Yeah, well, because our time is limited, I want to switch gears real quick. Governor Hochul also earmarking $1 billion to address the city's mental health crisis. But some of her critics are saying that the plan focuses too much on making more hospital beds available and doesn't really address the issue of permanent housing. So what are your thoughts on that?
Again, I did like the idea of some of the broad strokes. We do have to get into details. I will say we do have to have hospital beds. We don't have enough hospitals. That's 100% correct. We also have to make sure that we're putting a lot of that money into the continuum of care, because we don't want people to stay in hospitals. We want them to get stabilized, and have a continuum of care that is available to them. We also do know we need supportive housing. I do think the governor mentioned that. It remains to be seen which and how much money is going to be earmarked where. And that's some of the questions that we have to ask and we'll be asking. But, it's important that these broad strokes are there. And so I do want to give some credit where credit is due. But oftentimes, some things get lost in the details. And so we're trusting the legislature, who has been on board with a lot of these things, and many of us in the city who have been pushing to make sure we get those details correct.
I mean, $1 billion is a lot of money. So, so what's the next step then, in your opinion, sir? Is it getting everybody into the room? Because, again, this is something that is talked about, but what's the next step?
Well, $1 billion is a lot of money. I have to say we probably need even a little bit more, particularly when we have to split that up in the state. So we have to see how much is going to come to the city. We put out a report just a few months ago outlining how we're doing in programs like mobile outreach teams, like how many beds we have, like respite centers. And so we have a pretty good outline, if people want to follow it, to show where that money can go, so we can build out an infrastructure on mental health that we just don't have. And so that $1 billion to me is important. It's saying, recognizing that we need an infrastructure. That infrastructure can't just be about law enforcement, incarceration, and police. There has to be something else built out.
All right. Public Advocate Jumaane Williams, thanks again for being with us this morning, and a Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you. Thank you so much.
Okay.